Hello. So, another video in darkness because I can't find somewhere nice and quiet that fits my busy schedule. But we'll have to endure until either until summer or until I find a better place. Anywho, let's talk a little bit about what good code is. And what do I mean by good code? Well, this is probably the most subjective topic in the world. Because it is what everybody is telling you that they're trying to figure out, or that they have a best practice for. Best practices are great because everybody who works on a project will give you their opinion of best practices. And everybody has a different opinion about what good code is and what is maintainable code and like what in general all that stuff is. And all I can really tell you, if I'm completely honest with you, you have to fuck up pretty bad in order to say that, in order to have what I call not good code. And the principle is virtually the same in any field. Now, usually when you hear people complain about good code, it is the same thing as if people are complaining about politics, or you see builders complaining about how a building is built, or car manufacturers complaining about a car. They are so good at what they do in general that they are, and when they are discussing things, it's usually in terms of the small things that differ from the way that they would like to solve the problem. It's the flair, it's the personality traits of the person who is building something, who usually is the thing that they're discussing. Because for the most part, especially in code reviews and so forth, you are actually very rarely forced to rewrite the whole thing that you wrote. And if you think about that, if you are not rewriting the thing that you wrote, then the code is very clearly good enough. And for the most part, people will not, like, you will be called out on small things like, well, could you make this look a little bit nicer and so forth. For the most part, people that will read your code will not ask you to rewrite the whole thing. It's only when you make really critical errors or create really messy code where you get slapped on the fingers and you're forced to rewrite it. And so that opens to me up the question, what is good code? Or rather, when is the code good enough? And see, the best way to figure that out is, of course, to have peer reviews. I think that one of the most important things that I have done for myself when I develop things is that you learn your different practices and you try things out. And whenever you're faced with a problem because most of the time you'll find yourself trying to figure out, okay, I can solve this in more than one way. Which one do I pick? That's a perfect situation for a peer review or a code review. Talk to somebody, like grab one of your colleagues and ask them, what do you think about my code? And don't be afraid of criticism. Like, try to learn from the experience. Because for the most part, as I said, you have to remember that usually when people have an issue with what you're building, it's very rarely that you did it all wrong. It's like what I say about politics. Like, you can vote for any party that you want. Usually they will do things a little bit differently, but there's very little chance that one party is going to fuck up so bad that you won't have that buses will stop running, or that the hospitals will shut down, because 99% of what the different parties do is the same thing as the other party is doing. What you're really concerned about and what everybody's arguing about is usually that last 5% that they actually do different things. And to me, it's the same thing with builders building a building, you have to, every single builder, it's so established how these best practices or foundation principles are done that the discussion is never about, oh, did you do that right? Because you're good, like, it's just assumed that you will do it in a correct way. And usually the discussion and the criticism is more about those tiny little things, unless you're a complete beginner and you don't have any idea what you're doing, which usually isn't the case. Now, what is good code? As I said, it's very subjective. So in order for you to get better at writing code, of course, practice makes perfect, and it's really important that you have somebody on your team or somewhere where you can show them some code, ask them, what do you think about this? And then they can come with pointers and they can talk about, have an open discussion. It's a, pair program, do that sort of stuff. The worst thing you can do as a new developer is to start your own company. It's not it's a good experience, but it's very dangerous for you to isolate yourself. And the reason for that is very simple. If you're the only person writing the code and you're the only person reading your own code, you will not get any feedback on it whatsoever. If you can find a mentor, that's the best thing you can possibly do. I'm very flattered. There's one of my tech talks I held a year ago here in Gothenburg. One of the guys who was there watching, he is a junior developer who he actually contacted me, and I'm for the first time going to get to do some coaching, which is pretty cool. And hopefully I can help him. I don't know why he's talking to me, but it's going to be exciting. Hopefully, as I said, I can use a little bit of my experience to help him out. But see, that's like, if you're an experienced developer, that's also a nice thing for you to do. Like, you do some coaching, like talk to people about their code and try to just have an open discussion about it. That's the way you realize how to write things in an efficient way. And if you want more concrete guidelines on how to write good code, think about my 2 principles when you're writing the code. And my 2 most important principles, first and foremost, is it simple? In other words, does this code feel simple? Is it like, have you done any unnecessarily complex things? Or can you make it simpler in any way? As long as it's as simple as you can make it, in my opinion, that's good code. The second thing is it maintainable? In other words, are you the only person who understands what's happening here? Or is your code really stateful or very brittle or whatever? Or is it in a better way to say it? Do you use a lot of pure functions? Do you have you adhered to good practices and all that stuff? In other words, if you left that project today and I took over the day after without you teaching me anything, would I be able to start working on that project and understand what's happening? If the answer is yes, then you have maintainable code. Those are very loose terms, I know, but those are the best metrics I can give you for understanding when you're writing good code. And then you will learn best practices, like most people get bogged down in, how long is a function body supposed to be, and how many switches cases do your switch statement has. And yes, these things do matter, but once again, these are the 5% on the top of everything. So those 5%, sure, we can argue about that. And trust me, over time you're going to learn it, but it's very rare that you can fuck it up so bad that nobody understands what's going on in your code. And since we're all different, there's no way you're always going to be able to create perfect code that everybody loves. So in my opinion, we should aim to get those 90% or 95% that are so critical for everybody, that we all agree is really important to get down right. Focus on those percent, and then we can argue about the last 5%.